We've extended the deadline. Use code JOIN24 to save 20% when you join or renew with SME membership by November 8th. Visit sme.org/join24 and use code JOIN24 to learn more.
Today's episode is brought to you by Minitab, helping businesses worldwide turn data into powerful insights that drive real impact. You have data, we have solutions. Discover them at minitab.com.
Aerospace and defense manufacturing.
Machines and automation.
Additive manufacturing.
Smart manufacturing.
The global manufacturing economy.
Welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals, powered by SME. From the design screen to the shop floor to final assembly, we drive the conversation about making manufacturing smarter by connecting people who are passionate about manufacturing.
Hello and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals. I'm David Muller, Senior Editor at SME Media, and I'll be your host today. We're joined by Mindy Tomlinson, Senior Product Manager at Minitab. In her role, she defines the strategy and vision, the roadmap, and requirements for two of Minitab's products, Workspace and Engage. Mindy has over 20 years of experience supporting data-driven decision-making in the quality and continuous improvement fields. Thanks for joining us, Mindy. We're glad to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, David. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. So, Minitab, as far as software companies are concerned, at least, dates back pretty far, about 50 years, was started in Penn State University. Can we maybe start by just giving us a little bit of background on the company?
Yeah, for sure. We're kind of unusual. And like you said, that there's not a ton of us that have been around that long. Our founder is a woman named Barbara Ryan. She was a statistics professor at Penn State. And her motivation for building Minitab in the first place was just trying to teach statistics when students had to do all of those statistical calculations by hand. If you can imagine trying to calculate a best fit line by hand while trying to learn about regression, that would maybe be a bit distracting. So frustrated with that, she and a couple of her co-founders at the time developed a statistical application specifically geared towards beginner statistics students. To some degree, that's that kind of focus has kept with us the entire lifetime of our company. This focus on people that might not be used to statistics, might be coming to modeling and prediction, fresh or without a ton of experience. So we've always had kind of this focus on usability and kind of empathy with our users that might not have a ton of experience. So that's how we got started, and then we just grew from there. So it grew into the academic space, and then it grew into the quality fields and continuous improvement fields, and that's really our primary market nowadays. And from that, we even expanded past statistics. We realized a lot of our customers, our users in quality and continuous improvement, they do a lot of work before they run that t-test or before they create that graph, and then they have a lot of work to do after that. So we've built a suite of products to support them in all of the jobs they do, and that includes two of the products that we have. Those are the two that I manage as our Minitab Workspace and Minitab Engage.
Yeah, like you mentioned, today the company is one of the market leaders in statistical analysis and quality and continuous improvement, which I've seen as the acronym CI, continuous improvement. For our listeners that are unfamiliar with continuous improvement or CI, could you kind of explain a little bit more what that's about and how it works?
Yeah, for sure. So I think something like process improvement or performance improvement is probably a pretty familiar term. And it makes sense if you just on the surface level, we're working in businesses that are constantly trying to improve, right? Make things better, faster, more with less material. And so there's programs out there that are well, pretty much all companies are trying to do some kind of process or performance improvement. And then continuous improvement is just that on a larger, broader, more formal scale. So just this idea of fostering a culture of constantly focusing on improvement in the business, and it's a pretty broad umbrella. You might have heard some of the structured methodologies that are common with things like Lean Six Sigma or Kaizen or operational excellence. They all kind of fall under that broad umbrella of continuous improvement.
Excellent. Okay. And just kind of as a side note, which sectors do you work with? Manufacturing, obviously. Are there other sectors as well?
Yeah, so we have a lot of presence in healthcare as well, but manufacturing is definitely a large contingent of our customer base. But yeah, healthcare, some government, some DoD type of customers as well, and of course the academic space. We still have a lot of users in that area.
So maybe, if you don't mind, maybe a quick example of like a manufacturing scenario where continuous improvement really makes sense for a shop, for example.
Yeah, so really, it's so broad. It's kind of hard to go into specifics. But let's say I'm from Pennsylvania, and so we all love pretzels there, right? So imagine you're a pretzel manufacturer, and you're making hundreds, thousands, probably millions of pretzels a day or a week or a month, and you have quality standards that you're trying to meet, right? You want the pretzels to taste good and to be safe to eat, and there might be a bunch of different factors that go into that. And let's say over time somebody observes that a lot of these pretzels are coming out a little like underbaked, like they're safe, but they're supposed to be crunchy and they're a little too chewy or something. So a continuous improvement program might assign somebody to work on that specific problem, right? So they're going to say, okay, well, they're going to define the problem. They're going to say, okay, well, the problem is that the pretzels are too chewy. They're not crunchy enough. And define the scope. We're only going to be looking at these kinds of pretzels, not the pretzel rods or the pretzel nuggets, right? Like your traditional pretzels. And it's only for this specific line. And we're only looking at chewiness. We're not looking at maybe like the color or anything like that. And they define their team, and they go through this kind of whole formal process then of figuring out exactly what's important to the quality of that pretzel, and then what are all the factors that might go into that, and mapping the process of how that pretzel is made so they can make sure that they're being really thorough in all of the different places that can go wrong. And then they apply more structured mathematical or statistical techniques to that, doing sampling and measuring and recording data, and then documenting it and visualizing it, and then of course doing the whole presentation of their results, making sure that's all traceable, and finally doing whatever fix they choose to solve the problem and keep that problem in place.
Excellent. Okay. That to me, that was a very helpful example. So thank you. I want to talk today also about, why some CI programs, having said all that, why some CI programs fail. From your experience, how often do they do, how many do, and how big of a problem is this?
Yeah, so probably not a shock. We're a statistical analysis company, so we have a stat for that. And we've actually seen that all up to 70% of CI programs fail. Which is it's a large number. And it's not to say that they don't come back. That's usually what we see, right? We see programs start up, and then they'll fail, and then they'll come back with maybe new leadership or what have you. But it can be a pretty volatile area. And
typically when that happens, I mean, is there a main challenge facing continuous improvement programs as they scale?
Yeah, so that tends to be the way that they fail is in scaling up. So a lot of times what we see is these programs start, they get a lot of quick success, and then as they start to scale up, as they start to expand, that's when they really start to struggle. And with that, the by far, I think the biggest challenge that we see is just in demonstrating and proving value. So the problem with CI, or not problem, but one of the big challenges is just the nature of the work that they're doing. They're not generating revenue. They're not making the pretzels, right? They're instead avoiding or reducing costs. They're trying to reduce waste, or to reduce material usage, reduce scrap or defect. They're reducing cycle time, just trying to get more out of less labor or energy or what have you, and avoiding quality problems like warranty claims or recalls or things like that. So their goal again is just to save money, but the problem is the CI program is itself a cost, and as it scales up, right, larger programs can be that much more expensive to run. And so if you're not saving your business more money than it costs to run your program, and usually they actually want several multiples of that, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to keep the program around. And I think that's a really felt experience by a lot of the folks in this area. I once had a customer who led the CI program for a large healthcare organization, and she said to me, she said, "I don't know about you, but I don't like being a cost center." So I think that's again like a really a very felt experience. And that's not to say, that a CI program isn't worth it. Frankly, I'm not sure a company thrives without one. But again, there's just very real and understandable pressure from the business to make sure that CI program is actually effective. It's actually improving the business and in really measurable ways. And the biggest metric, of course, is to assess that the dollar, that's dollar saved. I sometimes like to think about our customers if they are, if you're the head of a CI program and you find yourself sharing an elevator with the CEO, and they lean over and they say, "So how's the program going? Saving us lots of money, I hope." Wink, wink. You better have a strong answer for that, right? So it can be a real challenge making sure that you are, well, one, actually achieving the savings, but then surprisingly, it's not even so much necessarily achieving the savings, but then demonstrating those savings. And especially again, as your program scales up, if you've got, if you're running a handful of projects, it's easy just to kind of tap people on the shoulder or ping them, say, "Hey, Joe, how's the project going? How much do you think or how much do they think your project is going to save us?" But when you're running hundreds, thousands of projects, just getting all that data together, just to get that one number, that ROI number, becomes a full-time job. I had a customer too who said that they were spending 120 man hours every month just getting data together to prepare for a monthly executive review. So just to get the data for that number that you might want to give to the CEO in the elevator. So that's almost a full-time job, just getting that data.
So how about we talk about then the 30% that successfully do this? How do successful organizations manage the challenge and successfully implement CI? Yeah.
So as with a lot of things these days, right? One of the big answers is just automation. How much of that data collection, that collating, can be done automatically, so that you don't have to go and chase it down. You don't have to go and spend 3 weeks out of the month just chasing down data. And one of the product that I work on in Minitab Engage, that's part of its big value proposition, is that it pulls out the key metrics, including the biggest one, that hard savings number, from the project itself, and aggregates those KPIs just into a nice dashboard. So you're in that elevator, you can just say, "Oh, hold on a second, I'll pull that up." You pull up a little web page, and it has a nice little dashboard, and it just says, "Oh, okay, good. Well, this quarter looks like we're estimating $12 million in annualized savings." So just making that process of aggregating the value that your program is actually achieving, making it accessible to you without having to go and get all that, do all that chasing around. And another part of automation or structure is as a centralized project repository. So rather than having projects and Word files and Excel files and PowerPoints and who knows what else just scattered about on SharePoint locations or in people's Outlook file folders or on their laptops or whatever, it's all in a centralized repository. So that you have all of the data you need. So there's just, again, less chasing around.
One of the other things that was mentioned to me with CI is that, aside from just the sheer man-hour challenge that you mentioned, is that there's a need for good projects. Could you kind of explain what that means?
Yeah, for sure. So sometimes I think about CI programs as like sharks. And I don't think this is true, but we've all heard that meme of if a shark stops swimming, it dies, right? And it's kind of like CI programs. Like if you are not, again, you're not generating revenue, so you have to be saving money. And if you're not running projects, you're not, creating those cost savings. So you constantly have to have this pool of projects that they can, that you can run to actually go and see benefits for the company. But it's not enough just to have projects. They have to be good projects. And those can be, that can be its own challenge in just trying to find, good problems to solve.
Yeah. And that'll obviously be up to each individual business or organization in that case, right? I mean, that's is there a way to avoid information silos, which, sometimes there's different teams know certain things and the other teams don't, and that just kind of creates inefficiency there. Is that something that you can kind of talk through, or is it something that CI can help solve?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, it's I think, again, a problem of scale more than anything. Just because if you think about these, larger organizations that might have multiple locations in within a country, or even multiple countries, or multiple continents. But there's a lot of repeated processes. So if I'm working in Pennsylvania and I'm working on my project and I spend 6 months on it, and I come up with a solution, and it's going to save us a lot of money, that's great. But we also have locations in Arkansas and California and Brazil and Thailand, I don't know, then we need to make sure that my solution gets passed around, so that the true value of that work can be realized. And then the other problem is well, that's on the end, with terms of replication opportunities once a project has actually been done. But even at the beginning, when you're first looking at a project, you're first trying to figure out, well, how do I really tackle this? There should be a good amount of information. If you're running a big CI program, there's been, again, thousands of projects that have already been run. Chances are somebody somewhere has done something similar to yours, or has done a project on similar equipment or with similar processes. And you might have never met that person, but you should be able to find information on their project easily, ideally, so that you can go and not waste time recreating the wheel, getting the information that they've already worked hard to find.
Okay, great. I want to go back to something we were talking about a moment ago, and just the good projects. I feel like I'm going to really give you a chance to talk about it. I'd like to know, maybe, could you tell me a little bit more about maybe what a good project would be versus just, a project that has to be done or maybe shouldn't be done even?
Yeah, for sure. So I just actually sat in on a talk. A friend of mine leads continuous improvement group at a really large beverage manufacturer here in the U.S. And he was describing a particularly hairy project concerning overfill. So I hadn't heard of this before, but so the problem with overfill is it's just like it sounds. You're filling up, let's say, a bottle with some type of liquid, and it's supposed to have 16 ounces, and instead it has 16.1 ounces. Which at first you think, okay, well, good. Nobody's going to complain about that, right? Right. But no one's also nobody's going to pay for that, right? No one's paying for that extra 0.1 ounce. You don't get any kind of good from that, but you're wasting a lot of materials when you're talking about producing, millions of bottles. That extra 0.1 ounce produces a lot of excess waste that you're not getting any value of. So this was this overfill project that had kind of been sitting around for a while. So a couple people had attempted it, couldn't figure it out. It had been sitting there for a while. There was just huge potential. There was just, again, so much money to be saved from this if they could figure out the problem, and nobody could do it. So it ended up in my friend's lab. Now he's got a master's in statistics. He's just very, very bright. I actually used to work with him here at Minitab, how I know him, and he's just got a really kind of tenacious spirit. So it landed in his lap, and he was the right guy for the job, as it turns out. And so he's telling the story of how they solved the problem. And the point of his story was he established this mindset in his team of failure is not an option. Like, just get it out of your head. So we're going to fail like everybody else. We're going to succeed. That's just the way it is. And they ultimately were successful, and they did save a ton of money, and it made a great story. But the problem, though, if you think about that, is that that problem, even though there's a ton of benefit, it required a ton of effort, right? They had to put one of their most experienced, most educated, most skilled people on the job in order to get that project done. And if your program is relying on having thousands of project leaders like my friend that could do that type of really tricky project, you're going to be in for some trouble, right? And not just because of the resources, but also ideally you'd have a bunch of really just kind of quick wins along with the big hairy ones, right? So high benefit, high effort, high risk projects, you want to save those for your most skilled, your most experienced project leaders. But you also want to have, ideally, a gigantic pool of low effort, low risk projects so you can just rack up some wins. And keeping that balance between finding projects that produce significant benefits but only require a reasonable or even, again, ideally minimal effort, is really helpful.
And how do successful programs go about doing this?
Yeah. So the part of the solution is just culture, right? I mean, that's one of those kind of hard truths is that there is an aspect of mindset involved, and that can, of course, can be challenging to change over time. You're talking about stuff related to people. So the most successful companies that we've seen have this mindset of follow the best ideas, no matter where they come from. Making sure you're recognizing and leaning on the experience and expertise of your operators and your process owners, and making sure people feel ownership in the projects and that they're leading and things like that. But even with that kind of culture in place, when you're working at scale, when you need dozens, hundreds, thousands of projects to execute on in order to meet those savings goals, there's still just a lot of practical challenges. You have to be able to make sure that you can effectively gather ideas so when they arise, so that ideas aren't lost. And you need to be able to assess the ideas that do come in, so that you can make sure you're focusing effort on the ideas that will return the most bang for your buck. And here, Minitab, we can't do anything about workplace culture, but we do have tools built in for minimizing the friction in terms of capturing ideas from anyone in your organization, right? From operators on up to executives. And then having a systematic and customizable, frankly, approach to routing ideas to the right person so that they can be evaluated. Having tools in place to rate or grade ideas so that you can avoid personal biases and hunches, making you figure out which projects you want to, or which ideas you want to pursue into projects, and then sorting and prioritizing. So it's that systematic approach, right? So just like we talk about with projects, where we want to be disciplined and structured in our problem solving, we want to do the same thing with ideas. We want to make sure we have a big bucket or big basket for gathering the ideas that do come in, and then being really disciplined and structured in evaluating the ideas and making sure that we're picking the right ones to actually go and start.
Okay, and within those projects, when within the projects themselves, what are some of the big challenges that CI programs could face?
Yeah, so this gets back to that very first challenge of demonstrating value is because these projects are not free, to run, you really want to make sure that you're executing on them and closing them. So that's kind of the worst scenario. Even if you find a good project and you start on it and you spend time on it and then you don't finish it, and then that's just more wasted effort, more wasted time. So you really want to make sure you're able to close these projects. And so again, even if you have great culture in place, solid pool of projects to pursue, if you have to make sure that the projects actually get done and the benefits come out of that. So the efficacy of your project leaders is crucial. And I would say the two big challenges we see with that, with actually finishing projects, is one, just a lack of access to good standardized tools and techniques for solving the problems. And two, just a lack of resources or literacy on some of these tools and techniques. Because some of these tools and techniques are pretty advanced, right? Like some of them, they might be covered in a basic statistics class, like a t-test, but then, or a Pareto chart, right? Something like that. But then you're talking about design of experiments or regression or machine learning or predictive analytics. Like these can be some pretty advanced techniques. And so if you don't have the literacy or the tools to back that up, or to be able to support you in actually executing on those, you could be in for a bit of trouble. And we've actually found that those two are pretty correlated. A good tool is kind of like a jig, right? It prevents you from using it incorrectly in the first place. So we want to make sure that when we're using these tools, that the kind of the guardrails are in place that you can use them successfully. And we see this where, again, with scale, where initiatives start out really strong. There's usually a big investment in training. You bring in consultants, you learn how to run a t-test, you learn how to use a Pew matrix, things like that. And then some time passes, maybe it's been 6 months, maybe it's been a year, even longer, and you haven't used these things in a while, and now you have to remember how to use them again and how they're supposed to work, or what are the gotchas? What did that trainer tell me about running t-tests? What was that important assumption? So it could be very, very, very easy to lose learning, even if you've invested in it well at the beginning. One of the examples I see all the time is there's this notion that a sample size of 30 is somehow magical. We see it as like a key requirement for statistical tests, and that's just not accurate. For a lot of cases, it might be way too big of a sample for some use cases, in which case you're collecting data you don't need. But the worst case is that it's not nearly enough data, and now you're trying to make decisions on an inefficient model or an inefficient tool. Things like proportions. Anytime you're using data with proportions or yes/no data, you need a lot more data than 30 usually, to get to your job done. But people have this n equals 30 and we're good, notion in their minds. I'm not completely sure where that comes from, to be honest, but that's just, kind of what happens because you haven't used things in a while. Something's sticking in your brain that n equals 30 is good. And so you kind of fall back on that rule, even though it's really not valid. So having access to tools that have that built-in guidance, trustworthy information, that can make a big difference.
And it's just as much data as possible, right? I mean, the more you can build on, the better.
Yeah, in general, although it's kind of funny. It used to be, when I first started my career, it was still kind of challenging to get data sometimes. And so it was always about, what can we do with the least amount of data? What can we get the most out of our statistical tools with the least amount of data? And now, frankly, it's turning into the opposite. Now we've got sensors on everything. We've got cheap storage readily available. People have terabytes of data just sitting around, right? Millions of rows of data. And now you're trying to make a scatter plot with a million data points, and it just looks like a blob, So both sides of the spectrum can actually be problematic.
Yeah, you have to be able to make sense of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Excellent. Well, hey, Mindy, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. It was great talking to you and getting some more insight on this.
Yeah, thank you. It was good to be here.
If listeners want to learn more about Minitab, where should they go?
Yes, please come to minitab.com. That's the source for any information. If any of your listeners are interested in engaging, whether it might help them, whether it might fit their program, just check that out. There's some more information on there and contact information for getting a hold of us. We'd love to talk to you. And I'll also just say, we put a ton of information on our website. There's white papers, there's case studies. We have a whole team of trained statisticians, industry veterans that put together good information, and it's all just free on our website. Including, I'll point out specifically two things. One, we have what we call our education hub, and that has whole learning paths and classes you can take, training even in person or online if you want to, just to get, again, some of that because we know continual education is so vital to being successful in these programs. So check that out if you're interested. And then the other part I'd like to draw attention to is we have a series of webinars, and we have one coming up real soon here on statistical process control. So when you're not doing projects, when you're doing more of an ongoing monitoring of data and alerts to problems, that's where statistical process control comes in. We have a webinar coming up on cloud-based statistical process control. So I would encourage people to check that out. It's all free. Just come by and take a look.
All free. Okay, excellent. Thank you. And to stay up to date about what's happening in manufacturing today and to hear more podcasts, visit us over at advancedmanufacturing.org.